interesting. We're beginning this SV Makara vlog and whatever else it'll turn into, and we kind of thought it'd be best to kind of say who we are and explain a little bit about us and why you're going to see a lot of the mountains probably for the next year versus a lot of the sailing. And we hope to get a fair amount of that in anyway. But currently we live up in the High Sierra, California, on the eastern side of the mountains by Yosemite, and so we really live the mountain life. Work a lot, because to live in a small town like that where we live, you have to either work many jobs or have one job that's like many jobs. But we for the sailing part, when I met Emily back in 2001, and just before that I bought my first sailboat, a Pearson Triton, and my job that I had was just kind of ending, and I had kind of a long severance pay. And so when we met, she asked what I was going to do. I said, well, I'm going to go sailing. And I guess she thought...
I was rather intrigued with that answer based on the fact that it's not quite typical. And, you know, for most people, if they're losing their job, they're desperately looking for another one immediately. Yeah.
So we worked for about, I don't know, probably about 8 months, you know, and I had things to do on the boat, and pretty much buckled down and worked at a marine store, and it's allowed us to pay for a lot of the things I needed, because only on that severance pay it wasn't going to happen. So we got that boat put together, and we actually sailed down from Seattle and took a month and sailed down to San Diego, and we really were planning on going further, but you know, life happens, and we kind of ended up in San Diego and ran out of money, and really didn't know how to go about making much more money at that time. San Diego was a pretty rough spot. I was really new to the whole boating thing, and didn't really figure we could find any place to live on the boat there and work. And it was one of those weird times of life, and so we made some decisions that what we wanted to do is kind of, we were going to sell the boat, and we were going to go kind of build our skills. So we moved to where my family was in Arizona, and I went to college, and you went back to college and finished your degree, and then I've always been a big climber. For years I was obsessive climber, and climbed things, El Cap, mountains, nonstop. And so my cousin was living here in the Eastern Sierra, and so he invited us over to ski, which I've not really been that into. And
But
but Emily was really
I
into
was
snowboarding, and so we came
Yeah.
over, and it was one of the big years of snow in the Sierras, and we had a good time. But then in the summer, my son graduated from high school, and so we took him on it was a month-long climbing trip, and we actually ended up coming over here to the Sierras and climbing in the Needles, and then coming up to the Mammoth Lakes area and climbing, and for several weeks, and climbing in Tuolumne and a little bit in Yosemite Valley. And then when we left, we on a whim just said we're going to move, and a couple weeks later we ended up moving to the Eastern Sierra,
Yeah,
and we've
yeah.
been here ever since. But a couple years into it, and we really got the bug to have another boat, and so we bought a Islander 37, which we've had and actually have to this day. And we fixed it up, and we actually sailed it to Mexico for a month, and left it there and sailed a little bit more around the La Paz area, and had a really great time. And that was kind of our first real taste of what cruising is like. And so we've kind of been focused that that's what we want to do, and we've wanted to do it for a long time. But we had this desire to have other people be able to join us, and on our Islander, it's really comfortable for us, but in the boat sails like crazy. The thing really gets up and goes. But but it was really hard to have people on there. And one day I was looking about a year ago, and I saw a boat for sale in Seattle that really kind of fit the criteria. It was a 50-foot boat. It had a couple cabins. Was a heavy displacement boat, full kill. And what's funny is when I think back on it, it's really the boat I always envisioned having, and it was in the right price range, which was kind of scary for me because I wondered what was wrong with it. And when we went and looked at it, it was kind of this perfect situation for us where we could afford it. And so we kind of jumped in and got it, and now I just sailed it down from Seattle down to Southern California, to the Channel Islands area, and we're transitioning, trying to sell our Islander 37, and kind of trying to make that move in the next year to start a cruising life. But there's a lot of challenges for us, and we're going to have to work through those over the next year, and it's really not going to be easy. The boat needs a few things. It doesn't need a lot. It's in pretty good condition considering it's a 1977 vintage boat.
Yeah.
But we've already put new sails on it, and
It just needs some cleaning,
clean-
cleaning up the wood and
the wood. But
things like
there's
that.
there's things. The generator needs to be replaced. If we're going to replace it, we put solar panels on it. But all the port lights need to be replaced. We may or may not need to change the windlass. We really got to just make a decision on that. But if you're a boat owner, you know what that means. That's a hard decision. We'd really like to put a water maker on there so that we're a little bit freed up from harbor. And so we're going to work through those, and we're going to figure out how we're going to get it all pulled together. And then hopefully in a year, we'll spend a season down in Baja as a transition and figure out how we're going to make a living while we do this.
Well, and
anyway.
the benefit now is that we've made it a point to develop a quite diverse amount of skills
Yeah,
that from hospitality to different crafts, leatherwork and woodworking, and graphic design and digital animation. So we're not professionals in anything at all, absolutely, other than maybe the hospitality industry
jack of
side.
all trade, master
Yeah.
of none kind of thing.
But we've got these skills that are sellable skills, whether we're creating products on our own or doing work for other people. And that, I think, is the one element that was really missing when we first tried to do this way back when.
Well, right, and we didn't have the confidence of really knowing what we were doing either. We didn't, it was just a lot of things we just didn't really. If we had understood, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But we just really didn't understand, and
Yeah.
it was it was right in that still we were kind of sitting in that recession right after 9/11 that happened, and it went on for about, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years there, and we were kind of still sitting in that. There just wasn't as many opportunities and options that were out there. We just didn't know how to capture. So
Right.
yeah, we have the skills now, and I think we'll be just fine. But the transitions are always hard. Um, so I guess what we're going to try to do over the next year while we're doing this is not just share the boating thing, but try to share the mountain lifestyle too. And there's
and the transition from one to the other, and the joys, of course, being in places like this, and challenges of actually making the transitions happen.
Yeah, and I think the difficulties are kind of the same. Really, it's just when you try to make a transition from one place to another, it's always challenging because it's not what you're doing at the moment. So you have to make a lot of decisions about how you're going to structure your life. But try to throw in some climbing, maybe LCAP, because I definitely got to get on LCAP next year. Got some projects that I wanted to do and haven't done them.
For me, just getting out and doing some bigger hikes and getting it back into the wilderness more.
Do some trail running through in next spring. Kind of heading into winter right now, so might be a little winter stuff. But then we'll have some sailing out in the Channel Islands and some projects on the boat. And see how it all turns out.
But we know how it's going to turn out.
We know one aspect of how it's going to turn out. We don't know how it's going to turn out.
Well, yeah. Trust. Yeah. So, welcome you along this journey of transition. And